Inverse functions. The inverse of a function is a result of switching all of the x and y values. We will do this algebraically. To find the inverse of a function algebraically, it's a two-step process. The first step is to switch the x and the y, and the second step is to solve for y. F to the negative 1 of x is the notation for the inverse of x. It doesn't really mean f to the negative 1 power. That notation means inverse. So the first step is to switch the x and the y, but there is no y in this problem. But f of x and y can be interchanged. So when you see f of x, you can replace that with a y. Now, step 1, switch the x and the y. So we have x equals 4y minus 3. Step 2 is to get the y by itself. So let's add 3 to both sides. X plus 3 equals 4y. And now divide by 4. So x plus 3 all over 4 equals y. Now that the y is by itself, we have found the inverse. The next example, f of x equals 4 minus x squared. So let's replace f of x with a y. And the first step is to switch the x and the y. So that would give us x equals 4 minus y squared. Now, because my y squared is negative, it would be easier to work with if it was positive. So let's move the y squared over to the left, and it would become positive y squared. Subtract the x. Y squared equals 4 minus x. And then to get rid of a squared, you square root. And when you square root both sides of an equation, you put plus minus in front of the square root. And that is the inverse. The next function, again, instead of f of x, we'll write a y. And then the first step is to switch the x and the y. So that gives us x equals y plus 3 all cubed. Now we want to get the y by itself. To get rid of a cube, you cube root. So now we have the cube root of x equals y plus 3. Trying to get the y by itself, we subtract 3 from both sides. Cube root of x minus 3 equals y. Now that the y is by itself, we know we have found the inverse. F of x equals 2 times the square root of x. So I replace f of x with a y. Now switch the x and the y. X equals 2 times the square root of y. I want the y by itself. Let's go ahead and divide by 2. So I'm on step 2 now, getting the y by itself. X over 2 equals the square root of y. To get rid of a square root, we square. And that's going to square the top and the bottom of our fraction on the left. So the top is x squared, the bottom would be 4, y is by itself, so we have found the inverse.